Let's dive in. Today we're witnessing a moment that could reshape the global economic landscape for years to come. The Supreme Court, often seen as the final word on American law, has just made a decision that reverberates far beyond Washington, D.C., one that could impact businesses, consumers, and governments around the world. The Supreme Court just delivered a ruling that shakes the foundation of Trump's sweeping tariffs, those taxes on imported goods that have defined recent U.S. trade policy. These tariffs, introduced as a way to protect American industries and pressure foreign governments, have been a source of controversy and debate since their inception. The court struck down the legal basis for most of these tariffs, sending shockwaves through global markets. Investors scrambled to assess the fallout, with stock prices swinging wildly and companies recalculating their supply chains. For many, this ruling was completely unexpected, and the uncertainty is palpable. Importers and foreign governments are celebrating, seeing this as a victory for free trade and international cooperation. Meanwhile, the White House is furious, calling it a partisan attack and warning of dire consequences for American jobs and manufacturing. The political divide is sharper than ever, with both sides digging in for a prolonged battle. This decision ignites a major clash between the executive and judicial branches, with billions of dollars and global supply chains at stake. The ruling challenges the very structure of how trade policy is made in the United States, raising questions about checks and balances and the limits of presidential authority. For decades, Congress let the president take the lead on trade, often deferring to the executive branch in the name of national security or economic urgency. But Trump pushed that power to its limits, using tariffs as a tool for negotiation and leverage on the world stage, sometimes bypassing traditional processes. Now, the Supreme Court says there are limits, forcing a national debate: who controls America's trade policy, the president or Congress? Lawmakers are suddenly faced with the responsibility to clarify their own role, and the public is left wondering how future trade disputes will be handled. The aftermath is uncertain. Tariffs remain for now. But the ruling opens a Pandora's box of economic and political questions. Will Congress step up to redefine trade laws? How will global partners respond? And what does this mean for the prices we pay and the jobs we depend on? One thing is clear: the world is watching, and the next chapter in America's trade story is just beginning. So, what's a tariff? Simply put, it's a tax on imported goods, making foreign products more expensive to protect local industries. Trump used tariffs as his main weapon, arguing that America was losing at trade, especially with China. He bypassed Congress, invoking emergency powers under a 1977 law meant for national threats, not trade deficits. This led to the highest U.S. import taxes in decades, targeting not just China but allies too. Trump's approach was a radical shift from decades of lowering trade barriers, using tariffs to punish rivals and protect American jobs. Whether it worked is debated, but his rationale was clear: fight back, no matter the cost. How did the Supreme Court reach its decision? It wasn't about whether tariffs are good or bad, but about who has the power to tax. The Constitution gives Congress, not the president, the authority to levy taxes. The court ruled that emergency powers don't let the president impose broad, open-ended tariffs. If Congress wanted to hand over that power, it would have to say so explicitly, which it didn't. The decision reasserts Congress's role in trade and limits the imperial presidency. Dissenting justices argued the president needs flexibility in foreign policy, but the majority disagreed. The ruling draws a clear line. The president can't act as a one-person tax authority. The power of the purse stays with Congress. The Supreme Court didn't wipe out all of Trump's tariffs, just the broad, emergency-based ones. This means that while the court's decision is significant, it doesn't represent a total reset of U.S. trade policy. Instead, it draws a sharp line between tariffs imposed under sweeping emergency powers and those justified by more specific legal grounds. The flat 10% tariffs on most imports, which affected a huge range of everyday products, and the retaliatory tariffs targeting countries like China, are now on shaky ground. These were some of the most far-reaching and controversial measures, impacting everything from electronics to clothing, and raising prices for both businesses and consumers. Now, their future is uncertain and importers are left waiting for clarity. But tariffs on steel and aluminum remain in place, since they were imposed under a different law tied to national security concerns. These tariffs were justified as protecting critical American industries, and the court's ruling leaves them untouched for now. For manufacturers and workers in these sectors, the status quo continues. So, while the biggest, most controversial tariffs are likely to go, Targeted ones on key materials like steel and aluminum are here to stay. This split approach means that some industries will see immediate changes, while others remain under the same restrictions as before. The result? A messy patchwork. Some businesses may get relief from lower import costs, especially those dealing in consumer goods, but others, especially those relying on steel and aluminum, won't see any change. Small business owners who import finished products might breathe a sigh of relief, while manufacturers dependent on domestic steel could still face higher costs. The legal distinction matters a lot. General consumer goods tariffs are on their way out, but industrial tariffs, especially those justified by national security, persist. This creates a complex legal landscape that businesses must now navigate, with different rules for different products. The economic fallout will be uneven, with some sectors breathing easier and others still struggling. Retailers and importers of consumer goods may benefit from lower prices, while domestic manufacturers could face continued challenges. The trade landscape is now more confusing than ever. With some tariffs gone and others remaining, businesses, consumers, and policymakers alike are left to sort through a complicated web of rules and economic impacts, unsure of what the future holds. Tariffs have hit American businesses and consumers hard, raising prices on everything from appliances to sneakers. Contrary to popular belief, it's U.S. companies and shoppers who pay, not foreign exporters. Businesses faced higher costs, tough choices, and supply chain chaos, while retaliatory tariffs from other countries hurt American farmers and exporters. Billions in federal aid were needed to offset the damage. The trade war disrupted decades-old global trade flows and damaged America's reputation as a reliable partner. Now the Supreme Court's ruling adds new uncertainty. Will collected tariffs be refunded? Can businesses quickly adapt again? The transition will be messy, with legal and financial headaches for companies and the government alike. Trade negotiations with key partners are suddenly up in the air. So, what's next? The story is far from over. In fact, the legal and political drama is just beginning to unfold, and the stakes couldn't be higher for the White House, Congress, and the American people. The tariffs aren't gone yet. The court's decision is on hold, while the White House scrambles to respond. Behind closed doors, advisors are weighing options, strategizing how to maintain leverage without overstepping legal boundaries. The administration faces mounting pressure from business leaders, foreign governments, and voters demanding clarity. The administration vows to fight back, but the real battle now shifts to Congress. Lawmakers are suddenly thrust into the spotlight, forced to confront questions about the balance of power and the future of U.S. trade. The Supreme Court didn't ban tariffs, it said the president can't impose them alone. This landmark ruling redefines the limits of executive authority, sending shockwaves through Washington and beyond. Expect fierce debate on Capitol Hill, committees will hold hearings, experts will testify, and lobbyists will flood the halls. Every interest group, from farmers to manufacturers, will fight for their vision of trade policy. Some will push to restore presidential power, arguing that swift action is needed in a fast-changing global economy. Others will argue it's time for Congress to reclaim its constitutional authority over trade, insisting on more oversight and accountability. Democrats may campaign on reigning in the presidency, promising to protect American workers and prevent future overreach. Meanwhile, some Republicans could try to pass new laws granting tariff authority back to the president, framing it as essential for national security and economic strength. The future of U.S. trade policy is wide open. Uncertainty looms over businesses, investors, and trading partners worldwide. Markets are watching every move, bracing for potential shifts in tariffs and regulations. Congress could repeal broad tariffs but keep targeted ones, especially against China, as lawmakers seek to balance economic interests with national security concerns. The process of unwinding tariffs and building a new system could take years. Negotiations will be slow, and compromise will be hard-won. One thing's clear: the era of the president as tariff man is over. The next chapter in America's trade story will be written not by one leader, but by a nation grappling with its own rules, values, and ambitions. For 80 years, the U.S. led the world in promoting open trade, building institutions and lowering barriers. This approach created new markets and cheaper goods, but also cost some American jobs. Trump's administration marked a sharp turn toward protectionism, using tariffs as leverage and rejecting the old consensus. The Supreme Court's ruling now puts that new era in doubt, forcing a national reckoning. The fight isn't just about tariffs, it's about America's role in the global economy. Will the US return to leading a global system or double down on nationalism? The answer will shape everything from trade to technology for decades to come. Why should you care? Because trade policy hits your wallet, your job, and your community. Tariffs raise prices on everyday goods. Removing them could mean lower costs for you, but the impact on jobs is mixed. Some industries are protected, others hurt by higher input costs. The court's decision creates winners and losers, affecting companies, workers, and consumers. In a globalized world, decisions in Washington ripple everywhere, from farm prices to the cost of your next phone. Trade policy isn't just economic, it's political and personal. Understanding this Supreme Court case is key to being an informed citizen. The rules of trade shape the price of everything, and that affects us all.